Okay, so a lot of persons said A and B. Let's see which two sides of the myosin heads on the thick filament are used to generate a muscle's mechanical force. Actin binding site and troponin binding site. So that is not correct. So we're talking about the thick filament only. So we're asking basically, what are the two sites on the myosin heads? B, troponin binding site and tropomyosin, so that's not correct either. It's going to be the actin binding site and the ATPase site, okay? So option C, remember the myosin heads were like those little golf clubs that kind of wrapped around each other. They had two binding sites, one to bind onto actin and one to bind the ATP to energize those myosin heads. So that's going to be option C. Alrighty, let's look at another. Okay, let me take a look here. Okay, so most persons said A, which is diastole, and that's correct. The heart spends more time in diastole, which is filling. In terms of the cardiac cycle, that's going to be phase 4 and phase 1. Okay, so the answer here was A, diastole. Oops. All right, let's look at another. Okay, so let's look at this question here. So we got mixed response between B and C. The heart can relax completely and fill between contractions in part because summation is not possible. We didn't speak a whole lot about summation, but we did speak about the principle behind this question. So basically, why can't summation of cardiac muscle contractions occur? And the correct answer is C. We did talk about the fact that cardiac action potentials are longer, so they're more sustained and they last many milliseconds, whereas an action potential is 1 to 2 milliseconds. So because cardiac action potentials are longer than an action potential, they cannot be added together, they cannot undergo summation. So the answer here would have been C. Okay. Let's see, we can rule out A because cardiac muscle does have tropomyosin. Calcium is quickly sequestered away before summation can occur. Okay, that's not correct. And then striations prevent summation, that's also not correct. All right, so the answer there was C. Let's look at another here. All right, another 10 seconds. Okay, let's see. So what is mean arterial pressure? Okay, looks like most persons said C. Mean arterial pressure. Okay, so first off, we know that mean arterial pressure is an average between systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. So if it's going to be between systolic and diastolic events, it's going to be across the entire cardiac cycle. And so we can eliminate C and we can eliminate D, because C and D only speak to ventricular contraction, which is only systole. So it has to be something that is happening or averaging across the entire cardiac cycle, right? It's going to be systolic pressure and diastolic pressure. If we look at A and B, we know that we measure systolic and diastolic pressure, not across all arteries, but only across the aorta. So it's going to be the average aortic pressure during the cardiac cycle. So what's happening in the aorta during systole, which is our highest pressure, during diastole, which is our lowest pressure, and if we average that, we get the average pressure in the aorta during the entire cardiac cycle, okay? Which we said is a really important indicator about cardiovascular function. So the answer would have been A here. Okay. We'll look at two more and then I'll see if there are any other questions. Okay, final 10 seconds. All right, so most persons selected A, or the majority selected A. Which valves help keep blood flowing in one direction from the receiving chambers of the heart to the pumping chambers of the heart? So we know the receiving chambers are atria, the pumping chambers are ventricle. So which valves keep blood flowing from atria to ventricle? And so that's going to be the atrioventricular valves, or option B. Okay, pulmonary valves are between ventricles and arteries. Semilunar valves are also between ventricles and arteries, and aortic valves are also between ventricles and arteries. So remember, aortic and pulmonary valves are the semilunar valves, okay? Atrioventricular valves are between atria and ventricles, and those are the bicuspid and tricuspid valves. So the key to understanding this was understanding what is a receiving chamber, that's the atria, and what is a pumping chamber, that's the ventricle, okay? All right, let's take a look at one more here. So the answer here was B, AV valves. Let's look at another one here. Maybe launch this. Okay, final 10 seconds. Okay, so we had an even split between A, C, and D. And the question asks, what is the electrical pathway of the heart in order? So we want to look for one that starts with SA node, right? You know, the SA node is the initiator, the first group of cells that initiate the rate and rhythm. So that's either A or C. And then we know from the SA node, it goes to the internodal pathway, then to the AV node. And from the AV node, it goes to the bundle of His, then the bundle branches, and lastly, the Purkinje fibers. So we can eliminate A because it does not go from the AV node to the Purkinje, right? The Purkinje are the last fibers before it goes back up through the ventricles and to the valves. So the correct option here should have been C, SA node, internodal pathway, AV node, bundle of His, which goes down the center in the septum, bundle branches right and left, and then Purkinje fibers on either side. So that was option C. Alrighty, that's all I have for you guys. I'm just gonna quickly remind you of what's gonna be on this fourth exam. So the fourth exam has muscle, the events of cross-bridge cycling, so those 5 steps, make sure you have a good understanding of that. We also talked about excitation, contraction, coupling. And then we spoke about smooth muscle, multi-unit, single unit, and then the excitation, contraction, coupling of smooth muscle. And then finally, we talked about the cardiovascular system. So those are the topics that we're going to be looking at for this fourth exam. It's not cumulative. It's only 50 points. So that'll be about 16 questions. And then our usual extra credit question as well. You will not have any more weekly quizzes. So we're done with the weekly quizzes. What we've got left is pretty much just this last exam and your practical, okay? Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck on the practical. Good luck on your exam next week. That will be on the 7th. So it's going to be May 7th. That's Thursday. And I believe you guys are at 12 p.m., I think. I said that last time. So we're going to tune in live here. I'll share the password. And then I'll let you guys kind of do the exam. And I'll kind of stick around just like I did last time if there are any questions. Alrighty. I think that's all I have for you guys.